Resident Evil series has to be one of the best discoveries I've made since I've started my channel. I always knew about it, but survival horror was never really my thing. That is, until I decided, like a year and a half ago now, to try Resident Evil 7. And man, ever since, I've been hooked with every game I've played in the series so far. Granted, there's a lot of them I still haven't played, but consistently this series has just been great for me, and I'm always really excited when I get to play one for a video. And you know I'm very excited for the Resident Evil 4 remake coming in March. I played the original like a couple of months ago and had a blast with it, so I cannot wait for that. But of course, we're not here to talk about how excited I am to play that game. We are talking about Resident Evil Village. So like I said, the first Resident Evil game I ever played was 7, and that was about a month or so before this beauty came out. I did actually play it around when it first released, so it was only the second Resident Evil game I ever played, and surprise, surprise, I loved it. I did kinda sorta make a video talking about it, but I never made a full review like I've been wanting to for a while. And I thought, hey, what better opportunity to play the game again when the new DLC and third-person mode drops. So yeah, I went through the entire main game again in third person, which felt like a totally fresh experience, and then I played the Shadows of Rose as well. And I'm gonna talk about both for this video. So if you've been thinking about wanting to play Village for yourself now in 2022, I'm gonna give you my honest thoughts whether you want them or not, and if I personally recommend you give it a shot. So, the big, no pun intended, thing about this game you may have seen before is this baddie right here. Whew! Yeah, if this isn't reason enough for you to try the game, I might question your sanity, honestly. But Lady Dimitrescu, sorry, can we get this off the screen? I'm having a hard time focusing. So anyway, oh, come on, really?
Flesh, bones, I will devour all of you!
That's better. But yeah, basically in this game, well, part of it anyway, you're running away from this very massive, attractive lady. Now hold on, I know what you're thinking. Yes, this is a horror game. She's kind of scary, actually, which actually makes her even hotter, so... But my point is, well, actually, I don't know if there really is a point, but we had to talk about Lady Dimitrescu because she carried this game's marketing. No wonder it had so many sales. But the story itself for this game, for me at least, is great. Now, I hear a lot of slander around the internet about my boy Ethan Winters, and I've got to say, I don't fully understand it. Yes, he's not the most interesting main character. He's no Leon, okay? He's not a bingo playing, zombie kicking, breakdancing badass like Leon, but that's kind of the point. Something I've understood and appreciated about Ethan's character, even back in like Resident Evil 7, was that the character wasn't meant to be some super spy, FBI agent, or even like a cop. He's just a normal dude, your average everyday Joe like most of us, thrown into these ridiculously impossible situations where somehow, some way, he's able to fight his way out. To me, that is the very basis of the character, and it brings a level of relatability and empathy for him that you won't get with characters like Leon or Chris. Do I think Ethan's a better main character than Leon or Chris? No, not really, but I still like him a lot, and his story gets even more interesting in this game, building on 7. I also felt that Ethan portrayed a lot more emotion and character in this game than in 7. Sure, he's still one of the dumbest human beings you may ever have the pleasure of playing a game as.
Maybe they're out.
Stupid. Something he has in common with almost every Resident Evil protagonist. He's got those great cheesy one-liners as well.
Caught myself a big one.
Another thing all great protagonists in this series share.
Won't fall for this old trick.
But I definitely noticed more emotion from Ethan in this game compared to 7. The voice actor definitely improved, and it helps that this whole time he's just trying to get his daughter back, instead of his stupid wife Mia. Sorry Mia, but you did this man so dirty in RE7. But him desperately chasing after Rose and his love for her adds a whole different layer to the character that was not there before. And overall, I just found the plot as a whole to be super fun. It's got this very fast, always moving pace to it, with some mystery story and plot twists, which I won't spoil of course, but it's all well done and makes sense. Now sure, are there a few plot holes here and there? Yeah, but it's nothing huge. I mean, you could go like, oh, why didn't this person say anything then, or why didn't they do this? Like in retrospect, you could probably poke a few holes in some of the logic and convenience of everything, but it really didn't bother me much, and overall it didn't take away from my enjoyment or investment in the story. And at the end of the day, that's what's most important. I will say the story is so much better and generally makes a lot more sense if you played Resident Evil 7 first. I mean, there's a recap in case you didn't play it, but it doesn't really explain the full context of everything. So if you're thinking about playing this game, you should definitely go and play 7 first. It's a great game. I'm sure you can find it really cheap, and it'll overall just give you a better experience when you go and play Village. I still have a hard time deciding which game I like more of those two. I go back and forth all the time. The newer Resident Evil games, so 7, the 2 remake, 3 remake, and Village all have this really good gameplay formula going that just doesn't really get old and is just so satisfying. I feel they just found this really nice balance between survival, horror, and action. Now some games lean a little more into one than the other, and depending on which you prefer will likely speak to which games in the series you like more. So while at the core, 7 and Village are similar gameplay wise, 7 definitely focuses more on the horror aspect, and Village is on the more action-focused side, but each game has bits of the other. Village still has scary sections, granted just not as many as 7, and 7 has those more action-heavy moments as well, but not as many as Village. Whichever one you prefer ultimately comes down to what you're into. That's why it's so hard to compare those games or pick a favorite, because I love them both for different reasons. Anyways though, enough about 7. Village's gameplay is so incredibly fun. Replaying this game after playing through the original Resident Evil 4 made me realize just how much Village takes from that game, and it just works. The swarms of enemies and intense action, the roller coaster pacing, the merchant with all the upgrades, it's just so good. The whole merchant upgrade shop where you can also sell valuables and cook food for upgrades was one of my favorite additions. It was a great idea to bring that back from Resident Evil 4. I found it so satisfying to progress and upgrade my weapons. I really enjoy this game's gunplay as well, all the different weapons and variants and stuff, and it translated surprisingly well into third person. It's definitely not perfect still, like it doesn't have the dynamic crosshair from the newer third person games like the remakes, where the crosshair gets smaller and more precise the longer you aim, but considering this game wasn't made for third person, I still consider it a very impressive feat. It's also kind of annoying they don't let you pan the camera around Ethan. Like, I get it, for some reason Capcom really doesn't want us to see his face, even though people went into the game files and did boundary breaks, so we already know what he looks like. So what's the big secret anymore? It's so weird, especially when it would have allowed for a better gameplay experience if we could just fully pan the camera. So I don't understand Capcom here, but whatever. I've never seen a game so dedicated to hiding its main character's face when we literally already know what he looks like. It just seems a little pointless, but Capcom's silliness aside, I enjoyed the third person mode. Now, I'd still recommend first person, of course, if you're going to be playing this game for the first time, because, you know, that's how it was originally meant to be played and was designed around. Plus, all the cutscenes stay in first person anyway. But if you're looking to do another playthrough in third person, I recommend that as well. It just gives a nice new perspective of the game and the world and everything. It was cool. I'm really glad they added this because a lot of people wanted third person back in the newer games, and they delivered. Now, of course, like every Resident Evil game, Village relies a lot on puzzles. Now, normally, I'm someone who usually doesn't like tons of puzzles in video games, and that's mostly because, well, I kinda suck at them. I do feel, though, as I've gotten older and hopefully a little smarter, and maybe just generally more experienced with single-player games, I feel I've gotten a lot better at the puzzle solving. And the puzzles specifically in Resident Evil, I feel are a lot more fun to solve than most games. They've always got this very satisfying feel or sense of accomplishment whenever you complete them. I don't know, I don't usually get that feeling with other games, but the puzzles in Resident Evil feel just challenging and creative enough without being stupidly hard. I don't know, maybe you disagree, but as someone who's usually annoyed at a game that relies on lots of puzzles, I really enjoy how this series does them. Which kind of brings me to the next point as well, because I also really enjoy the boss fights in Resident Evil. Now, I like the boss fights in this game, however, this is an area I personally think RE7 did better. The boss fights in Village are just very easy for the most part. I remember in 7, on normal difficulty, each boss, except for I think the last one, ironically enough, took me at least multiple tries before I brought them down. In this playthrough, I did not die a single time during a boss fight. Actually, scratch that. I didn't die period during this playthrough. Well, okay, the only time I did was running from the stupid fish guy, and I messed up and stepped in the wrong area. Looking back, I definitely should have played on hardcore this time. That's my bad, but in my defense, I was using controller, and I don't usually use controller, so I didn't have a ton of faith in my abilities, but I guess I underestimated myself, or overestimated this game's difficulty. So learn from my mistake. If you're someone who wants a challenge, play on hardcore mode. But yes, difficulty aside, the boss fights are a lot of fun. Visually, they look amazing, and I like how each one feels different than the next. And of course, it's not only the bosses that have variety, there are plenty of unique enemy types in this game as well, each showing up in different areas and kind of forcing you to play each enemy type differently. There's all sorts of different types and variants for the Lycans. There's a flying Samkas, interesting name, and the haulers and all those enemies in Heisenberg's factory. There's plenty of variety across the board.
Where the hell am I?
I don't care who you are or what your standards are for graphics, you cannot deny this game is gorgeous. The village, Castle Dimitrescu, House Beneviento, even the stupid factory looks beautiful in its own twisted way. The detail, the layouts, and designs of each area, as always, is great. I love the exploration this game allows for. I'm the kind of person who really likes getting all the extra loot and weapons that I can, and I love that Village rewards you for doing so. I like finding the hidden areas and treasure, or backtracking to something I noticed earlier in the game but I didn't have access to yet. They do such a good job at making use of a small space. They don't need a massive open world to give you lots of exploration and extra stuff to do. This time around, I did even more exploration than I did the first time. I did everything I could, and I didn't want to leave a single area left unsearched in red on the map, and in doing so, I discovered a really cool boss fight that I didn't even know was in the game. I went my entire first playthrough without even knowing it existed, which is one of many reasons that makes exploration so enjoyable in this game and why it's worth replaying and doing multiple playthroughs. Now, as I stated earlier in the video, I don't think this game is quite as scary as 7. The Baker house was terrifying. 7 did such a good job of making you feel constant uneasiness and building suspense. However, this doesn't mean Village doesn't have its share of scary moments. As I think anyone who played this game can agree, House Beneviento is the scariest part of the game. See, the scariest part for me in Resident Evil games is the atmosphere and stalker enemies. I cannot with stalker enemies. Oh my god, I was a mess in the RE2 remake, running and hiding from Mr. X. Wait, man, get away! Just leave me alone! So in the castle with Lady Dimitrescu, even though she's a very lovely lady, kind of, the second she becomes a stalker enemy, I'm petrified. It's something about the fact that all these moments in gameplay are completely unscripted. Like, scripted scare moments or cutscenes don't scare me, but when it's left to my control and I have to will myself forward, that's what brings me the most fear. Like, just knowing the stalker is out there somewhere and could be behind any door, like just that uncertainty of not knowing where they are and they could pop up at any moment. Ugh. But House Beneviento takes that fear to a level past Lady Dimitrescu and unlocked a fear I didn't even know I had, of giant monster babies. So while overall, yes, 7 has a scarier atmosphere and had my heart racing almost the entire game, Village certainly has its moments. I may or may not have gotten jump scared by my own shadow once. Yeah, shut up, don't judge me. So I'm going to talk about the Shadows of Rose DLC. If you have not played Resident Evil Village and plan on doing so, you should skip this section. I'll leave a timestamp to go on screen to avoid spoilers because it's kind of impossible to talk about this DLC without spoiling the end of Village. However, I'm going to do my best not to spoil anything about the DLC itself in case you haven't played it yet. Okay, so I trust everyone has made their choice. Alright, so the Shadows of Rose DLC takes place a solid 16 years after the ending of Village, where we of course play as Rose Winters, Ethan's daughter. As we find out, she's kind of been struggling to live a normal life as someone with mold powers and without a father figure. You know, she's being bullied at school, called a freak, all the typical mean things kids put each other through at the school. So this DLC is about Rose finding a purifying crystal inside the Megamycete so she can hopefully remove her powers and be normal. Now generally, I found the story to be very satisfying, and if this is the conclusion to the Winter story, then I'm very happy with it. It's not perfect, there is some cringy dialogue, but it's about an angsty teenage girl, so that's to be expected. But I think the emotional beats this DLC was trying to hit did, for me at least. But again, that's because I really liked Ethan and I wanted a good conclusion to his daughter and his family. I mean, after all we went through to save you, Rose, you better live a good life. Now obviously Rose has mold powers, although it's a little confusing how they work. They said Rose was like Evelyn's true form, but her powers don't really work like Evelyn's. Oh well, whatever. The powers weren't actually as big a factor in the gameplay as I was expecting, to be honest, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. You pretty much use them to stun enemies and break the cores on some of the mold gooey stuff to get loot or clear a blockage. Regardless, I thought they brought a nice little twist to the gameplay, and the rest is pretty standard Resident Evil. You get a pistol and a shotgun, lots of puzzles. Also, you can't play this DLC in first person, it's third person only. However, unlike the main game's third person mode, you can actually pan the camera fully around, and you get the dynamic crosshair similar to the RE2 and 3 remakes. I'm assuming because this DLC was built with specifically third person only in mind, unlike Village. This DLC was also a lot more challenging on standard difficulty. You can't guard like in 7 and Village, and there's no sort of dodge button or anything, so it's pretty difficult to evade enemies. It can be kind of annoying getting grabbed constantly by these mold things, and they just very creepily suck your face into spaghetti, and there's nothing you can really do about it unless you have the mold counter. On top of that, Rose runs very slowly. It's a lot like the RE2 remake, where it felt like you needed some form of evasion or dodge mechanic to get away from these enemies. I'm not sure why exactly they didn't include at least the guard, but oh well. Almost all the locations from Village are reused in this DLC, but spiced up a little with the mold. Castle Dimitrescu, House Beneviento, which is again the scariest part. I actually think it was even scarier than the monster baby. There's these creepy Mia dolls that run at you the second you look away from them. Oh, it gave me chills, but it was pretty awesome. Honestly, one of the coolest and scariest ideas I've seen in a Resident Evil game. Oh, and the animation on them looks so good. There's also this stealth section where you have to essentially play hide and seek from these very large dolls while you're like tiny. I thought that was really fun and unique as well. The stuff in House Beneviento was definitely the best area in this DLC. I can't believe they made this place the scariest area in the main game and the DLC. The DLC is pretty lengthy as well. It's around 3 hours, which if you consider the length of the main game being around 10 to 11 hours, that's pretty good for a DLC. The Winter's expansion is $20, or you can buy the whole game's gold edition, in which the expansion comes with it, for $50. I recommend this DLC. If you really like Ethan and the whole Winter story, I feel this is the proper conclusion. You need to kind of tie a bow around the whole thing. It's not perfect, but for what it needed to be, it absolutely delivered, I think. So if I have not convinced you to check out this game yet, then I don't know what else to do. It's a great game. I highly recommend it. Of course, I'd recommend playing 7 first if you haven't yet before playing this game. I do think I still slightly prefer 7 to Village just because the atmosphere and the more grounded horror feel had me thoroughly immersed the entire way through. But again, I still love Village and I appreciate some of the changes it made. I've still yet to play a game in this series that I didn't like, and I hope that continues. Let me know if there's any Resident Evil games you want to see me play and make a video on next. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Village in the comments, and Shadows of Rose if you've played it already. We're so close to 160k. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to my members supporting me. It really means a lot. And thank you for watching. Have a good rest of your day.